Victoria,
Nicole.
thank you for coming today. I appreciate you driving all the way back here to do this. I never get to talk to people in the spiritual space.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I love this for you.
Yes. I love spirituality. I want to talk about it all the time. And the people who entertain that are open-minded, but they're not as far down the path with spirituality as I am. And so getting to meet someone who's farther along than myself is very exciting for me.
That's so special.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's just going to make today so much more rich.
Yes. So what I want to start with is the topic that is my favorite, what brought me into spirituality in the first place. And that is, why do we come here in the first place? What happens before we come here? What happens after we go back to where we came from? What is your perspective on that?
My perspective, at least from my point of view, because I can only really understand my point of view in the best possible way. So someone else might not totally resonate with this, but I believe that my soul came on this planet at this particular time to master, clear, restore harmony to my energy as a soul so that I can fulfill my mission. So I don't believe that all star seeds feel this burning desire to fulfill their mission. For me, I feel that if I don't fulfill my mission, it feels like akin to withering away, waiting to die. It drives me mad to consider not fulfilling my mission. And so I feel that I came here to clear the past lives where I didn't complete my lessons, the different interferences from generations that have bled through in my energy, different challenges that my soul did not heal in the past, so that I could, in this life, clear that shit, get on the right path so I could fulfill the fullness of my mission. And then I believe that when I pass, I go back to all that is. There's an extraordinary book, and it's called Journey of Souls.
I've read it.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about. That felt like a piece of me that put something together for me. I love the idea of going back to school when I pass. And that feels really validating and also very true for my body. My system feels like, yes, when I pass, I go back to school and look at my life in terms of lessons, neither positive or negative or good or bad, just simple lessons that my soul came here to experience. And did I accomplish them? Did I move past them, or did they still hold me back?
I love that you bring that up and you bring that book up. I've read so many, so remembering which specific things came from the book is hard to remember because I went through so many books at that time. But I do remember the feeling I had after reading it because it was one of the first. And just opening my mind to this idea of school, of it being lessons, the whole point of coming here to learn and fulfill some sort of mission, some sort of thing that collectively, as all of our souls are trying to learn, as well as individually as souls, and to bring that back to the collective and be like, we've learned this lesson.
Yes.
And how many times sometimes you have to come and do the same one over again. So you obviously believe in past lives. To me, that's obvious.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense to me that we would just come here this one time and that's it.
Yes. To me, I am very moved by the idea of finding understanding. I think that's a big driver for a lot of people in their spiritual journey. What does it mean to be here? And where did I come from prior to being here? And I also feel that a lot of people, should they have the understanding of different past lives, I believe that it would help them heal some of the greater lessons in this life where they ultimately come up with the conclusion that maybe there's no conclusion. And to me, that doesn't feel right. People should be able to have access to knowing what these kind of pestering patterns are that don't feel like they come from your conditioning, what they are, why they are here, so you can ultimately move past them.
Right. You're going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. You see that with people in relationships, picking the same type of person. And I think I go right to the spiritual aspect of it going, what am I here to learn? Because clearly I'm given the same situation over and over again and I'm making the same choices. What if I chose differently?
Yep.
And when people do, they get a different result. And I feel like you'll feel that sense of peace, like mission accomplished, you know?
Yeah, no pun intended to the conversation we've just been having. Totally.
Exactly. And so I really believe that. I think one thing people struggle with, and I know Nikki does, my wife, she struggles with the idea that she might have come here to learn a lesson with her former partner, who they had a very bad relationship. And I think that there may be aspects of those types of things where people come and learn a hard lesson and you think, I would never choose that for myself. But I kind of think in most cases we do, especially those lessons that are such a large impact on our life.
Yes.
They have to have been some sort of karmic lesson that we wanted to face, or we had to balance out a karmic debt, or we wanted to check this off because we didn't do it in the last life.
Totally. When I think about your wife, I think about somebody with a lot of substance, like myself. And I relate to that because that's why her and I get on so well. It's the artist in us that loves the ruin, if you will, because it creates something extraordinary. And funnily enough, of course, Hayden and I were having this conversation yesterday because I've been really immersing myself in other extraordinary artists. I've been watching a lot of podcasts and listening and observing common threads between all of them and finding home in them. And one thing that was common between all of those that have accomplished something insurmountable to the human mind was a devastating amount of trauma. And Hayden started laughing. My fiance started laughing because he said, well, that's probably why I'm so vanilla. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, my parents have been together for 2 decades. I came from a loving home. I'm a middle sibling and I definitely felt like I was loved. And so you always say to me, I want more depth from you, but maybe this is just the depth of what it's like to have a secure home. And yet in my life, my parents got divorced 3 times each in the fundamental developmental years of my life before 7 years old. And yet I am arguably the most driven, passion-based, kind person I have ever met when it comes to helping others create a better life for themselves. And it goes back to my earlier point, like I would rather have $0 and know that I fulfilled my mission than have all the monetary things in the world for some sort of fake security. And that substance has made me so much wiser to be able to serve such a grander amount of perspective in humanity. And that's something that I see in your wife. And I think that's why her and I understand each other from a creative lens, because when the trauma is big enough, there has to be a home for it. And for a lot of people like myself, art was that place. There was no other way that I could cope with the tragedy of being in a traumatizing environment as a child than pretending to be somebody else. And that's where I spent my life, being a child performer, singing and entertaining and getting validation and feeling like I mattered and getting approval and getting disapproval and that making me stronger. And that escapism allowed me to build a life of depth and richness and substance that if my parents were still together and I lived in a happy, healthy home, that's not to diminish anybody's experience, but it definitely creates a certain lens of color that you see life through that is minimized unless something really fucked up happens to you.
It's so interesting that you say that. And I love that perspective. I love that you've gotten there on the journey for yourself and really understood it. So many people go through these traumatic experiences and then maybe they grow a little from it, but oftentimes they play the victim for the rest of their life and let it take control of their life and keep repeating those same patterns. Whereas you are harnessing this to bring good to the world. And I love that. For me, as you say that, I see how Nikki has dealt with what she's dealt with, and it has made her stronger. It has made her more connective with people. She has more that she can speak to, more that she can empathize with.
Yep.
And I'm more like Hayden. I had the happy home. I was an only child who had everything I wanted. I don't feel like I was a spoiled brat about it, but I was never wanting for anything. And that was all fine and dandy until I met Nikki and saw someone who'd been through a lot and grown so much. And I realized right before that I just haven't grown. I'm not growing. I'm doing all this work. I'm trying. I'm reading all these books. I'm listening to all these podcasts, but I haven't been through anything. So I'm not growing. And I thought I'm going to have to go through something. Upon reflection though, once I was with Nikki, I realized that I had self-inflicted a trauma for myself by creating this expectation of myself with perfectionism, with high achievement, similar to you, and also with escapism. I would escape into Harry Potter, magical worlds, and ultimately food addiction. And so I dealt with a food addiction for 20 years from the time I was a teenager up until my 30s. And when I met Nikki, because she had been with someone who'd dealt with addiction, a different type of addiction, and when I expressed that to her, she was concerned. And that was going to be a roadblock for us because some of the habits that I had, addictive habits, were reminiscent of her ex's addictive habits. And that was very triggering because she was still working through that trauma. And I realized in that moment, I won't get to be with the love of my life if I don't finally get over this and take this out of my life. And so I had to grow up really fast in that moment and move through that, get the help I needed, really figure it out. I thought I'd tried everything up until that point, but I hadn't. I hadn't gone to the right therapist, someone who had experience with that. And I hadn't really intentionally looked into potential medication. I hadn't really intentionally asked myself, what am I doing it for? It was always for me, and that wasn't enough. And if it's not enough, it needs to be for somebody else. Ultimately, it was for me in the sense of getting the love of my life. And it was for her to make sure she felt safe. And that ended up being enough.
We're very similar in that, actually, in that story, because there was a time, Hayden, we were maybe about 2 years or so into our relationship, and he said, "You break up with me every third week."
Oh,
Like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I am at the point where I don't trust anything that you say when you tell me that it's time to move on or that we're not going to work out. And that has been my way of just kind of dismissing it because I know 2 hours later, you're going to go, "I love you so much. This cannot work."
right.
And I think when the risk is enough to lose, then people change.
Yep.
And in the case of my relationship with Hayden, it, similar to you, only healthy relationship I had truly had that felt like it brought me to God. And that felt like I was betraying God by not choosing to move beyond this pattern and know that trying to run away from somebody before they abandon me does not work. And what did I actually want underneath that was for someone to stay. It was like, "Don't go because I really need you to stay. Don't go because I'm afraid you're going to leave me anyway. Don't go, but I need you." And when I realized that I was energizing the part of me that was trying to push him away, when deep down I just wanted someone who cared enough about me to stay, when he gave me that ultimatum, which I needed a lot earlier than that, but that's a gift of having such a beautiful partner, is that he's extremism in our relationship. Like, "Oh, this isn't going to work. I don't know. Like, I'm growing a lot and he's not." Like, I still go into these stories that are untrue to try to push away the security, but I have not broken up with my partner since then.
Amazing.
And that's a huge accomplishment for me. But for anybody who has an avoidant attachment style, when they can finally say, "I don't want you to go, please stay." When your entire body, Hayden calls it my porcupine aura, where my energy gets so like repulsed because I need my own space, because that's what I did as a child. I would lock myself in my room and escape. So my aura would become so defensive. For me to be able to breathe into my heart and say, "Please stay," that was like probably the hardest spiritual path I had ever been on, was choosing to accept love when all of my patterning told me that they were going to leave anyway.
That was the most vulnerable thing you can do, right?
Totally.
Because you're letting that wall down and you're actually saying the thing you actually want out loud. Yeah. I love that so much.
And I love that we kind of have a similar pattern in that. And now here we are in really deep, beautiful queer relationships, modeling spirituality and queerness. And I think that intersection is so important to talk about because it's not something that I have had a lot of inspiration around. And so to be able to have a friend now that I'm inspired by that is also on this spiritual path and is also queer, it's really beautiful for me because when I met Hayden, that was my first female relationship. I never went to a gay bar. I never explored like, ooh, she's hot, kind of attracted to that. Definitely not into that. I never got that experience. And so to be able to be now at a point where Hayden and I look like a typical hetero relationship out in public, but we are a queer relationship, to have queer friends that I can communicate and connect with in a way that I never got to explore because I fell in love too fast.
Right.
It's just beautiful to have a friendship like this.
Oh, that's great. No, I love it too, because we don't really have that as well. You know, we're straight fronted gays, as we like to say. And we both came in that way.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't know people in the queer community, but not directly where we have, you know, regular in-person interactions. So really appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about this. I'd never heard the term spiritual psychosis before.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. What does that mean?
Spiritual psychosis happens when someone on their spiritual journey takes a path of extremism. And this can happen in religion. This can happen really in any community where you lose your footing of balance and you forget to be human, or you forget about what matters. You forget about this physical reality and you start to see yourself only as your soul. So you start to see yourself as like this walking metaphor, and you start to notice that people become more allegorical and less physical. You see that people become more thematic and less real. And I see this a lot in the spiritual community. I actually had someone in my inbox recently who told me that she was my spirit guide and that I needed not to do the great merge, and that I would be okay to let go. And it was like message upon message upon message upon message of her being in complete spiritual psychosis, to the point that she has no idea who she is as a human being. She has no governance over the voices in her head and who and what they are. And in the pursuit of finding, she's become completely lost. And this is spiritual psychosis, becoming absolutely disconnected from the very body and this third dimensional reality that you're living in. So it's like disassociation over and over and over again in the pursuit of finding, to the degree that you become lost. And while you think you've reached nirvana, you're absolutely nowhere.
So how do you know when that's starting to happen? How can you recognize it? Because I know as I'm trying to awaken things more, I find myself getting into this place that feels very high vibrational. I can physically feel the vibration in my body and I'm feeling like I'm connecting more. But then I start to lose touch a little bit with what's going on and it gets depressive.
Yes.
Is that the first sign?
Totally. And I think one of the biggest signs to note in the beginning is, are your feet on the ground in the pursuit of the information? And can you know when enough is enough? One of the hardest parts of my journey, especially when I started to understand more about duality on this planet and the fact that there are nefarious beings that are extracting life force from spirits and that they need an external source to survive. And I couldn't understand what their purpose was. In that pursuit of that information, it was almost like I couldn't do anything other than trying to find what the point was. And in that, I would spend hours sitting there trying to download, trying to understand, trying to research, trying to figure it out. When that right there was when I needed to catch myself and say, hey, you're trying to pursue something that is not coming to you in truth. When it comes because you're forcing it, this is an indication of the finding and getting lost. High vibrational information, such as your life path, such as big soul lessons, such as deep healing, does not happen by opening up the blinds and saying, see the whole picture. It's like a little bit here. How do you receive that? A little bit here. How do you see that? Do you see how these two come together? Whoa, that's interesting. Let me sit with that. Oh, there's another piece. It's like a puzzle. The spiritual psychosis happens because somebody is in pursuit of the whole puzzle, that they lose their feet on their ground. And then when they lose their feet on the ground, now they're out of their body. Now they're out of reality. And then they're like, I've got it. And then they look around and they're in the middle of a desert and they've got no one and nothing around them. And they think, was that enlightenment or was I just lost?
I could see how it would be so easy to fall down the
Totally.
desperation of wanting to understand and wanting to know and wanting to connect so bad.
That's the
Been
key.
there.
Yep. Same desperation, right? When the emotion and the driver is being desperate, that is not natural. When it is natural, it should feel like you're following this intuitive insight that comes drip by drip by drip by drip. And you're allowing your body the time and your mind the time to create a new reality based on that information. In the times that I have had extreme paradigm shifts where spiritually big things happened, I see something I'd never seen before. I'm visited by a being I've never had happen before. I do work I had never done before. It did not come in like, and then, hello, welcome to the whole show. It was like, is that a being? Oh my God. How do I feel about that? Right? How's my body receiving that? And then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, following those intuitive drips and noticing when desperation is driving you and being brave and courageous enough to say, hey, wait, forcing means that I'm moving unnaturally. Letting information be introduced to me because I'm trusting in the timing and I'm okay with whenever that truth is meant to come in. That's how you grow spiritually without losing your fucking mind. And this is a conversation that is really important to be having because we have more information than ever before. And that is and can be a very dangerous ground to be on if we do not have our feet on the ground to begin with. Most people don't even know how to ground, but they're reading all about, Merkabas and the Arcturians and channeling deities. It's like, if you don't know how to ground your energy and you don't know how to do something as simple as a body scan, you are putting yourself on a very dangerous battlefield without any physical equipment to protect you for what could come for you.
Right. You mentioned when you were speaking to Nikki that you would never try to call in a spirit.
Yep.
And is this to do with entities?
Yeah. And it's also to do with just not being an idiot. Like recklessness in the spiritual community is a really slippery slope. When people say, spirit talk to me, my first question is, what spirit? Who? How do you know them? What's their role? How did they come in? Not just, I heard a message from spirit. That means you're untrustworthy. Or when have you ever seen people on TikTok who have like 7 deities that came through their channeled message? Or like Ra was here and Jesus was here and all these other beings, archangels are here. No, they weren't. You just probably had a ping in your clairaudience. And because you don't have discernment, you just ran away with it. And now you're spreading misinformation to people from beings that weren't even actually there. So one of the big parts of my journey, having been someone who was doing visualizations and astral traveling all the time, connecting with beings, going to different motherships, I think, trying to channel different information from different beings, was recognizing that that was really dangerous. It was a very dangerous game to play. And people don't like to use the word danger because they think it's associated with fear. I would never tell a 2-year-old to ride a big bike before they know how to ride a bike. It's like, no, training wheels, right? No, safe environment. No, mom and dad right there or parent right there before you do something crazy, right? Safety is something that we all need in order to evolve. And yet when it comes to at least my spiritual growth, safety felt like something that was idiotic to do. and to implement because I didn't need to because I was source energy. And now my perspective about invoking, going outside of my energy to call something in that did not contact me is stupid because it's dangerous. And it's also not coming in truth. I'm a curious being. We're all curious beings, especially on our awakening journey. But life is way more enriching when it's coming naturally to you.
What about calling in your guides?
Mm-hmm.
Could you specifically do that? Or I've heard people say to call in your angels.
Yep.
Or even your higher self, or someone specifically that you knew who used to be alive and is over there now. Would you call those type of people in? Never?
Nope.
Fascinating. Okay, I do this.
Okay. But my question is like, what angels?
Great point. Sometimes I pick them out because I've looked into them, but I very seldom do the angels. I usually ask for guides or I ask for someone specific.
Okay. Do you know who your guides are?
No.
Okay. Then why would you call them in?
I know what they look like, but I don't know their names.
Okay. So,
or I know what they feel like.
okay. As long as you have some sort of resonance where you're able to clairvoyantly or clairaudiently, claircognizantly, clairsentiently pick up on their vibration, then now you want to know what their role is because they're contracted to you. So now I would actually call them in one by one, like they were standing in front of me and say, who are you? What's your origin? What's your role? What's your contract with me? Now I understand them from a point of view of actually being a guide instead of this like overgeneralized thing that they actually don't serve me in any way. When I know who they are, then I can call them in like I'm talking to a person. If I do not have resonance or connection with my guides, meaning let's say you didn't feel them at all and you just called in your guides to protect you, you're not a vibrational match for them. So why would you call in something that's not naturally coming to you? That is usually a recipe for you to experience trickery, where a being will say, I'm Jesus. All the time. I talked to Jesus today. Well, how did you know? Because I felt unconditional love. Did you?
It's probably just spirit in general.
It's probably just where, it's like, I don't tolerate people who say, I talked to this thing and it's like out here. I respect somebody who's like, it's right here. It's this being. We have this conversation. They work with me in this way. Now, when it comes to your higher self is here, right? It's not out there. Your higher self is connected just a little bit above, right?
Yep.
So you bring it down and in, which is totally different than I'm calling in this angel over here, I think, perhaps. And I'm not a vibrational match to it, but I'm going to call them in anyway. So in the case of you, because you're already a match, your next step would be knowing who they are. So you could say, call them by name, bring in their natural vibration, and ask for them specific questions and support so they're not these like elusive things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had one experience where I audibly heard, because I hear in my brain.
Okay.
I can feel like I hear the words in my mind.
Yep.
But once that I audibly heard when I was laying in my bed back when I was a lot younger in my 20s, someone go, hello, man, British accent, full on, scared the crap out of me. I lived with my parents at the time. I got up, I'm in my 20s, got up, slept in their bedroom because I was like,
you're like,
nope. No. It was very warm, very kind sounding. And I sat with it for a long time afterwards. And I felt like it was my guide. I didn't feel like that was, I've had an experience with an entity before, which I would love to share with you after. It's a bit of a long story, but it was something separate of that. This felt good. This did not feel unsafe, but it scared me in the moment. And so I just needed space from where it happened.
Totally.
Because my bed was a very active space. And I felt like that was a guide. So I would use my pendulum and ask what your name is. And so we got to the letter M, we got to the name Mitchell. And so I thought Mitchell just feels, it doesn't seem like it would be a spiritual name to me, but I kept with it because if that was the closest we could get, I'll refer to you as that. I know guides can change over time though. So I don't know if he's still one of my guides. I get the sense that yes. And I've had another one come in. I feel like this is just, I don't know that I trust myself with all of this, right? So it's hard. That one I heard for sure. The other one that comes in presents to me like a Black woman. Okay. You say you can't say they're out here, but that's how I perceive it. So I don't know how to explain it other than that. So tell me what I'm doing wrong. With Mitchell, I feel like he sort of has his hand on my shoulder and just gives me that energy. But with the Black woman,
Mhm.
and she wants to tell me her name is Rhonda all the time. And I'm like, it's not. It can't be Rhonda.
I refuse.
It just feels weird. It doesn't feel spiritual. But if that's like what she's telling me to call her, maybe I can't pronounce her real name. I don't know.
True.
She says that and she stands in front of me.
Okay.
And that's how I experience her.
Yep.
And that's it. I feel like there is another one lingering,
Yep.
but I can't look directly or get any sense of what they look like or who they are yet. Maybe they're coming in later. I don't know.
So your guides are on a certain contract with you. And so you're absolutely right that they will change and be replaced sometimes when you have graduated different lessons. So in the beginning of my first interdimensional connection with a spirit guide, who was my grandfather, it made sense that when I was clearing a lot of generational information, that my guide would be someone from my bloodline. Because I was still in the beginning part of my awakening where I had a lot to clear in my family. And then I remember, because he kind of sat on that left side, but he was like talking to me. One day I couldn't feel him the same. And I was like, okay. And it took me a few meditations to go, I don't think he's here anymore. Like, I don't think so. And obviously because you're projecting into this abyss, and you're seeing it interdimensionally. So it's obviously not physically here. It's hard to trust. Just like you were saying, it's hard to trust. And one of my guides came through at the time and was like, you are now going to be working with different guides. And like within weeks, a dragon came through.
Wow.
Yeah. And the way he came through was like fucking crazy. Like then I had another guide who came through and she's like, she gives me very Pleiadian energy. Her energy is like very, very humanoid, but also giving me very like iridescent, almost like elemental. And she helps me really work with my voice. And so even when she comes through, it's like my voice feels like it changes. And I'm like, whoa, that's weird. That's never happened. And then the final guide that came through, his name is Abe, and I work with him not as frequently, similar to maybe like your potentially third guide. And he came through and completely took over my entire body. I remember I was like, I feel something. And every time I call him in his name, I can feel him in my upper chakras. And then it's like my entire body will like convulse and he'll start to talk through my ear. And when he first came through, I was like, so I have 3 new guides and they give me very alienoid energy. Whereas prior to, I had my spirit guide who was a spirit. That shift into new guides happened when my energy healing abilities grew as well. So when I moved out of like, and then I'm balancing someone's chakras to like, I'm removing generational curses and I'm destroying demons. Like it changed because I needed more capacity spiritually to do the work that I could do. And so the way they came in, I had no idea that I was going to have new guides. And they came in and made themselves known with like really significant signs. And vibrationally, they all feel totally different. So I can tell what their role is. Like my dragon is really strong for protection, really strong for destroying, really strong for helping me see where I'm going. My other guide, her name is Calliope, kind of that Pleiadian type guide. She works with really a lot of the healing vibrations that I work with to raise vibration, to tone and sing, because I had been a singer for a very long time. And then Abe feels like he's kind of like that supervisor that like hangs out in the corner at like the dance and like just like watches until it's time. He gives me very ascended energy, but I don't work with him as commonly. And so when it comes to guides, I believe that they are contracted for certain soul lessons. And so for you, if Mitchell is still there, I would call his name in and I would ask Mitchell to show me his true vibration. And instead of just kind of hearing him, I would wait to feel, because with clairaudience, it never typically comes on its own, meaning the sound that comes through your ear usually is also accompanied by a feeling. So it's like clairaudience and clairsentience are married. And so I would rely on that feeling to go, show me your true vibration. And then if he comes, you feel a breath or you feel really peaceful, you feel little shivers, you feel warm. You're like, okay, what's your role? right? With Rhonda, I would do the same thing. But the only thing is, if I did not get a feeling of like crystalline, unconditional love, I would revoke. I would say, I'm unavailable for this. Please step back. I would clear my energy. And I go, okay, maybe I'm not working with who I think I'm working with.
Okay.
What's that about?
That's fascinating. Okay. I'm going to definitely do this when I
and
sit
let
in
me
a
know.
meditation.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about this. I did a meditation not too long ago, but a month or two ago. And I think I was listening to just some theta waves or something like that. And it was a longer one than I normally do. Usually it's only, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. But I got into this very nothing state. Usually I have constant visuals. My brain is so visual that I don't understand the difference between my imagination and what is actually being shown to me.
Yep.
Certain things I can identify that are for sure shown to me because they pop into my brain so instantly out of nowhere that I sometimes pop into what feels like either a past life, simultaneous life, or someone else's through someone else's eyes for a split second. And I get a visual that are really fascinating, or someone will pop up in front of me like it's a spirit and I see their full face, full everything, very clear, and then they're gone. And then I went with Nikki and she was going to get some weed at the weed store. And I was standing outside. And as we were scooting to the store on our little electric scooters, I could smell everything. I have a terrible sense of smell. I could smell every flower. I could smell every negative smell. And I'm standing outside the store waiting for her to come out. And people were driving by in their cars. And I could smell what was coming from their cars. I could smell the cigarettes. I could smell the body odor. I could smell the perfumes. I could smell everything just from the car. And I thought, this is bizarre. I have never in my life had that strong of a sense of smell. Gone the next day, but I haven't tried it again. And I was just, it was so weird. Have you?
I can feel what it's like to be the conversations they're having. Like I can pick up on just about every consciousness. And that's why existing is very hard as a human. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you probably touched a higher dimension and then like coming down back into your body, you probably maintain some of that higher dimensional access. And so when you get higher in dimensions, I think people misunderstand. It's like, getting higher in dimensions doesn't necessarily mean a higher vibration dimension of awareness. Okay. So you're just more aware, experiencing the sound bite. Like I would be able to experience the actual experience of being the microphone because I would be connected more so interconnected with all that is instead of like, Nicole and Victoria are here sitting here with microphones. It was like, I would be able to perceive myself through different form. And so I wouldn't be surprised if when you came down into your body, you were still holding that higher dimensional access. So then when you were out and about as a human, you were able to perceive more because you were more aware.
Wow.
That would be my assumption.
Fascinating.
But on a day-to-day basis, my challenge is being very high in my awareness.
You must have to close yourself off so that you're not just constantly getting everybody's energy and absorbing it.
Totally. That's what a day in the life is like for me. And I think about, for example, like Tyler Henry, the medium, like the celebrity medium. I respect the work that he does because it definitely has a shelf life when I look at it because he's so drained by doing all the work that he does. And he doesn't necessarily have control over the spirits that come through, which obviously, as we know, that's not necessarily in integrity with me. But who am I to say if somebody's not getting help from somebody as a healer or a medium that they should not be helping other people? Like kudos to anybody who's bringing in accurate information that's helping somebody on their life path heal in some way. However, when I look to him and I've like heard him talk in previous interviews, he was like, when I'm not doing this, I'm like literally laying in my bed all the time. He's like, I'm just straight chilling. He's like, I'm a guy who loves some fries and pizza. And like, I'm a guy who loves to just be human. And it's like, that balance is very integral to me and very important for me to be able to continue to do the work that I do because I feel everything.
What do you have to do to block that out or to ground yourself?
I always try to notice where my shifts of energy sometimes come from that feel like they come out of nowhere. So it's like if I go into a grocery store and I have shields up, like I always have protection on my energy. When I'm in a public place, that's unpredictable. If I go into a grocery store and some lady is like pissed off looking for like the right avocado, unintentionally, like I will carry those fragments with me. And when I leave, I'll like snip at Hayden. And I'm like, why was I so snippy? Like that doesn't make any sense. And so I'll have to cleanse my energy either through an intention, either through getting home and actually using some form of air element, using light. So using actual white light through my auric layers, or simply just having a shower, depending on how strong it is. Cleansing is one of the greatest tools that everybody should have. Because an empath is really just a clairsentient person without a boundary. So it's like, are you really an empath, or is it just you're very clairsentient psychically and you just don't know boundaries yet? So higher boundaries is really important for me. It can feel lonely sometimes, but every job has risk. The job that I have on this planet is to help people grow their psychic gifts and to help people heal and restore their energy spiritually. I'm okay with that because every job has risk. But with that, the sacrifice that comes with that is that being human is actually what my full-time job is. And like being so fiercely protective of the integrity of which I teach equal to the integrity of which I'm embodying. So for a lot of the development of teaching the sovereign healer, I think I struggled a bit because I'd be teaching people about grounding and I'd still have such a hard time grounding myself. It's like I was healing myself through the methodology, but now I'm actually like the living, breathing example of, okay, it's time to grounding cord. Okay, it's time to cleanse your energy. Okay, shields up. Like, okay, discern. Like I have become the walking embodiment of what I teach. And as a empath, now that I've actually understood the boundaries that need to be in place so that I can at least be mindful of when energy is influencing me instead of having complete control over me all the time. And now I actually have the tools to be able to clear where the world ends and who Victoria Josephine People is. And that was not something that I had my entire life. I always felt like it was like me in the world, always immersed in the world, feeling like I didn't understand the world because it was like so heavy and painful. And I just wanted to help. And like, why do people hate like this? Like, I don't get it. And then like, why did I grow up in a world that was so painful and challenging? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like starseeds feel so like amiss, awkward, like obstruction in the world. Like they just feel like this weird thumb in the world. And now I understand that that's because I'm here to create a new world and support in a new blueprint for the world. But with that, that means that I need to be in the world, like enough that I can be able to help humanity by feeling what humanity is navigating, but not to the degree that I can't serve the truth for humanity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the best teachers are the ones who have been through the exact same situation and learned how to overcome it or learn from it. And so if you hadn't gone through all that you went through, how can you best serve to help those who are trying to come out of something equally as traumatic, right?
Totally. And I would say that because I have experienced in a short life, such a multidimensional experience of trauma and pain and dream and art and curiosity and evil and love and condition, I feel that my palette for understanding people is really strong. And I've been like that my whole life. Like I would have no money, I have like $10, and I would see a busker in New York City and I would give them everything I had. Like, and it would just be, it's in me. It's in me to give and to feel and to understand. But with that, not to the detriment that I feel so much that I don't understand who I am. I have to know who I am. I have to know who I am as a person and who God chose me to be.
Right. I want to ask you about that. You always use the word God, and a lot of people in the spiritual space tend toward the words universe or source. Why do you choose God?
Well, because universe and God are not the same thing.
Okay, explain that, because I use it interchangeably.
Well, because the universe is like created by God. So that's like saying that my mom and I are the same thing. We're not. My mom created me, but like God created my mom and God created me. So I'm not my mom. I was created by my mom.
Okay.
So I see, like in this context, God is my mom, and I was created by my mom, I was created by God. So I was made in the likeness and the image of God, but that does not make me God. In the same way that God created the universe, but I do not feel that they're the same thing because I feel that God was the creator of this creation, which is different than being the creation and the creator.
Would you put source when people use source?
Yeah,
The same as God?
I would say so. At least that feels palatable to me. But in my experience, I used universe because I had trauma around the word God.
Yeah.
And then when I realized I had trauma around the word God, it was like, oh, well, if I didn't have trauma around the word, would I use the word God, or what word felt suitable to me to describe this omnipresent guiding force in my life? And when I was really deeply immersed in the New Age community, universe was that word for me. When I realized that I was not God, but I was created by God, and I actually had a relationship with this source, then to me, God felt like the right word. Because I don't feel like I am God. Fuck, I would never be able to do the work that I did if I fucking tried to play God. I serve God. That's the way I see it.
Do you think of it as a separate entity in the way that it is humanoid in the same way that we are?
I feel like humanoid is maybe the wrong word. But when I think about God, I think about a masculine presence.
Okay.
And I think, but in the same sense, I also think of it as like all that is. So it's kind of nuanced for me. And I think there's so much healing in the gray because for me, God feels like this protector and this guiding light in my life that reminds me of my purpose. I like to say that God is my map. It's like God to me is this, this force of energy that directs my current by when I follow my intuition, that I'm following this current of energy where I fulfill every heart desire I have. And so in some ways I do kind of feel, to me in my energy, it's this masculine presence, but I understand that this masculine presence is the creator of everything that is. It just feels like home for me to feel this provider that is guiding my energy to my dharma.
It's interesting. So you had said that your parents brought you to church when you were young.
Yep.
But they never forced it upon you.
Nope.
So you were given the open-minded approach to take it or leave it,
Yep.
which is great.
Thank God.
And I think everyone, if they're going to bring their kids to church, should leave them to decide for themselves.
Totally agreed.
Love that. Where did the trauma come from?
I think it was just that when your life is so hard, you kind of hate God if you don't understand what truth is. And for me, I felt like I had a lot of reasons to hate this presence that was creating a life that I always felt like was harder for me than other people. Like I had to work so much harder to get by. I always actually saw evidence in my life of, okay, well, we made it, but hardly. Or we kind of made it, but like it looks like we made it, but deep down we're like in the hole. And so for me, I think it was my projection on God of the self-judgment I had on the life that I was living. And then that was really what the trauma was, is that like I could not grapple with this idea that there would be some omnipresent being that would create everything and like laugh in the face of so much suffering and like not help me out of it. That's what it felt like. It's like, where was God then? What about then? What about then? What about then? What about then? And now that I feel less self-critical and judgmental of myself. And that's probably my hardest wound, is like, I am so hard on myself. Like if you knew what happened in my head every time I think I should be further than I am, which is basically all day, every day, then of course I would project that on God. But the kinder I've been to myself, then the more my heart opens to the fact that maybe my life was a projection of my own reflection.